Hey everybody, welcome to the Strength Yoga and Freedom YouTube channel or the Strength Yoga and Freedom podcast that you're listening to me on. I am Justin. I am so glad that you are here today. This is part one of a two-part conversation that I had with my dear friend Tavi Rose. We talk about so many different things in these upcoming two episodes. We talk about stopping words. We talk about boundaries. We talk about covert control. We talk about conditional beliefs, limiting beliefs. We talk about narcissism, people that we work with. There is so much good content in this conversation. I really hope that you listen with an open heart and that you take anything in that kind of strikes a chord in you and you make a decision to move forward, maybe in a new direction or maybe with some new tools or tricks or tips up your sleeve to help you in the path of purpose and happiness, because that's what this is all about. So please get ready for a fantastic conversation. This is part one of the conversation with Tavi, and I hope you enjoy and stay to the end because there is some fantastic stuff coming up. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Strength Yoga and Freedom podcast. And yes, I am joined by my dear friend Tavi again. Tavi Rose. Hello, Tavi.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everyone. It's great to be here again.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here.
Coming on. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Full disclosure, everybody who's listening and who's watching. So this is Tavi and I's third time recording this episode. And the reason that we're laughing is because the first time we recorded, there was a huge audio problem on my part. The second time we recorded, I went ahead and forgot to press the record button, and we had a really nice conversation. But here we are. We have kind of work through some audio things. I have definitely pressed record and we're here and we're ready to talk. And the best thing, Tavi, the reason I love talking to you is because I don't know where our conversation's going to go. And I also know that the conversation that we're going to have is going to help a lot of people. That's the other reason I love talking to you. So let me reintroduce you to the audience for those of you who don't remember Tavi. Tavi has been on 2 episodes of this podcast already. She was with us in season 1 and she was with us last season, season 2. And this is going to be a 2-part episode. So we're going to have half on this episode and half will air next week. And Tavi is a Reiki master. She is also a certified yoga instructor, 200-hour. And Tavi has also self-published a book, The Chakra and Self-Development Workbook, which I will definitely leave a link in the description of the YouTube video. And I will also leave a link in the show notes if you're listening to this episode on a podcast platform. And so Tavi and I met when we were in that 200-hour training, my gosh, 6 years ago now, almost 6. We met.
Almost, yeah.
So since then, we have stayed in touch. We've worked together on some projects, and we don't live near each other anymore, but we certainly love to stay in touch and bring episodes to you that are relatable. And Tavi, we talked about this the last time we recorded, and I want to bring this up again because it was so impactful for me. I remember the first time we actually did something outside of the yoga studio, and that was that time we went to get lunch or something. And you were like, "Hey, you want to come with me?" You remember that?
Yes, I do. That was so nice that day. I know you're about to explain how you felt, but it was actually nice to feel, I don't know, there was a comfort that was within that moment that it was outside of my normal, stick to myself. But it really was nice that it was actually, we made that connection on a friend level, and it's just blossomed ever since. And I'm so grateful for that whole experience.
Me too. It's funny that you meet people in those types of situations and then you never know where things are going to go, because there's certain people that that went through that training with us that I don't see anymore, I don't communicate with
Yeah.
anymore, and there's people that I do see here and there, and so that's crazy. But that was quite the journey for you and for me, wasn't it? That 200-hour training,
Absolutely.
that was quite
Yeah,
the
yeah.
journey.
It so was, because you know what? In my state of mind, prior to even signing up for yoga teacher training, your goal is to become a yoga teacher. It's
Yeah,
pretty plain perspective. But then once you go through it, it's one of those experiences that teaches you more on so many levels than you were
yeah.
aware or prepared for. And it's such an amazing and beautiful experience when you have that kind of environment. And it's a vulnerable thing to go through.
And that leads me to this topic that I love talking to you about, and that's
Okay.
these words. You use a term you use a term for these words, that,
Oh yeah.
like the word yoga or the word chakra, kind of talking about your book. What is the term that you use for these words?
I call them stopping words
Stopping
sometimes
words.
because yes. Um
And I want those of you who are listening to really hear this, because stopping words, this is something that Tavi and I have been talking about on a personal level and on a professional level for months. Uh, and the reason I started this episode talking about how we met and what Tavi does, and a lot of you who've been listening and watching me for a while, you know what I do too. We are in this kind of yoga world, yoga quote community, but that word of yoga is also a stopping word. Can you talk to us about why you call them stopping words and what that all means? Because it's so fascinating for me. And I know other people
oh
will resonate.
sure. So when you hear, like, if you're not used to yoga or you're unfamiliar with like the environment or background of it, people think, oh, yoga, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga. Oh, chakra, I don't know anything about a chakra. Oh, things of that nature, that people just have that preconceived notion and stigma of you have to be a certain aesthetic or, in a certain way. But really, it's just a matter of perspective and choices. Your
Mm-hmm.
perspective of the word and understanding of the word can be two different things. Your
Mm,
perspective of yoga, and I'm not saying everyone has this, but certain people who have the perspective of yoga being an aesthetic, hippie type thing, I would
mm,
say don't really understand yoga, because it's not just looking pretty in poses or looking pretty in yoga pants. It's
mm,
not yoga at all. If you're not connecting your mind to your body and your body to your spirit, you're not really practicing yoga. That's
mm,
my way of it. And it's out there for anyone or everyone looking for that connection to themselves. That's literally it. You don't have to be these perfectly aligned in a pose and like the way the books. Not everyone has the same anatomy. Not everyone has the same capabilities or
yeah,
flexibility, but that's what yoga is there for. It is a tool. You look at a
yes,
hammer and you say, oh, that's for hammering things. But guess what? There's another side to it. You can pull things out with the forks on the back. So it's
yes.
not just you can do more than one thing with a tool.
It's
It's
a
not
good
just for
paperweight.
nails. It's
It's a good paperweight too,
exactly.
a hammer.
Exactly. I mean, that
That's
too.
funny.
So it's just your matter of perspective and how far you're willing to go. And same with chakras. Chakras are a thing
Yeah.
that everyone thinks is a spiritual woo-woo thing without realizing they are the emotional center house to why you feel the way you do, why you react the way you do. And when you take the time to look at what's in them or how they're developed, then you can start to understand your own um, self in ways
Yeah.
of how you think, how you feel. And then maybe you'll even realize that once you get to the core of that feeling, it's not meant to be that way because you're tired of being like for me, a big thing for me, I used to get so upset and react for things that made me angry. And I
Mm,
got so tired of reacting that I wanted a response, not a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wanted to be able to respond and not overreact because something hurt my feelings, or, you know, once I got to the core of what caused my insecurity in that matter, I was able to do the equations in the way to not make that feeling project outward and overwhelm myself and those around me, if that makes sense.
Sure does. It sure does.
Okay.
And I want to build upon what you were talking about when it comes to, you said the word, you know, chakras are not necessarily a spiritual kind of woo-woo thing, and it's so true, because in your book, what I found the most accessible, that's the good word, that's a good word to use. What I found the most accessible thing about your book is that it was written for someone who has no idea about anything with that word, chakra or yoga. And even though you are a sort of a classically trained vinyasa style yoga teacher, when you wrote the book, you did not write the book in a classical vinyasa style. So this book and your message for me was not, okay, so now you're first going to start here, then you're going to go here, then you're going to do this, then you're going to do that. And again, there's nothing wrong with that type of yoga. Many of us practice that type of yoga. Many of us teach that type of yoga. There's nothing wrong with that. But what we're talking about here is the intention behind it. For me, always felt as though you were just trying to get people some healing. Yes. Like, here are some tools for healing. And don't you feel sometimes like, you know, when you're talking about, you were alluding to the fact of, you know, the chakras, you know, they're there, and they are, when they're misaligned or when things are going on in there, it changes the way you feel and the way you act and react and all that. And you mentioned about, you know, the way you reacted to things before and what you're working towards now. Everybody, I believe, everybody has the opportunity that's able-minded and able-bodied, okay? Everybody who is able-bodied, able-minded has the ability to make a change. But you can't make a change if you're looking at these words and you're like, well, that's never going to work for me. Or, oh, that yoga doesn't work for me. Or, oh, yoga's only for females. Or, oh, I just talked to somebody the other day and they were like, my husband won't come to a yoga class because there's no males in there. What does that matter? Like, why are you, what's stopping you? So the reason I'm saying this is because your book gives people, if you're open to it, a chance to look inside and go, hey, there's more to this than just the red chakra or how to align. There's so much more. And so I wanted to make sure people heard that, and that you heard that from me, because that's something that I took from your book.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the feedback. I really do. Even constructive criticism, anything that I can go back to and, you know, at any point. But originally, yes, the whole purpose and intention is for the beginner and anyone who's not familiar with that, because I wanted each pose is specific. It's not in a flow for a reason, because as a beginner, you're not going to understand flow. True. You're not going to, you know, speaking from a person who was a beginner, and as we've talked about, like, through different conversations, you understand what I mean by, like, complete beginner thrown into vinyasa.
Yeah.
But my point is, I wanted somebody to be able to pick up the book and look at it and say, I guess I could try that, because I didn't want it to be overwhelming. I didn't want the chakra definitions and all the things that go in, because it's a lot. It's so overwhelming at times.
It is.
I didn't want it to be information overload, and I wanted it to be relatable, understandable, and basically, you know, as beginner friendly as possible. So each pose is intended to put you in it, because each pose deserves its own focus.
Agreed.
It really does. It deserves its own reason, because it's helping you. It's the tool that's helping you in a specific manner, but it's there as an option. And if I wrote it in a flow or, you know, something like that, then maybe it would be too overwhelming for some beginners, not every beginners. And I wanted to make a point to say something. You said able-bodied, but how many people who choose to stay in that mindset that they aren't able-bodied.
Yes.
So
And you know what I mean? And
yes.
too, I'm so glad you brought that up, because what I mean by able-bodied, and I know you and I are on the same page with this. Able-bodied means you don't have a physical limitation, meaning it will hurt you. The same goes with mental. People are born with,
Yes.
mental disabilities that prevent them from
Right.
certain cognitive. Okay, that's what we mean by
Behavior.
able-bodied, mentally able-bodied. And so I am so glad you brought that up, because you're right. People will go, oh, but I have a stiff back. Well, a stiff back is different than having a broken back where you physically cannot do it, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly what I mean by perspective of the word.
Yes.
You're able-bodied. For my own personal illnesses and stuff like that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, I deal with chronic pain, and I wake up all the time. But I don't consider myself unable, because I've had to do the work. And I'm not saying everybody's like this or that it should be this way for everyone. But it should, at least, if you're sick of the unabled and considering yourself to be that person who's not an able-bodied person, what choices can you really make in your life to change that? And is it that detrimental where, if you're not needing the assistance of a cane, and even people, how many times have we seen people with canes or, from accidents, or elderly people come in and they start doing some yoga, and then it changes their mobility for people who have been in severe accidents, elderly people who, arthritis, and just, you see them walk in and they're crickety, and then they start to open up and move, and they get into that flow.
Yes.
And it's not just because that physical movement is so good, but they're giving their mind a rest to allow their body to talk.
Correct.
They're listening to their body.
Correct.
And there's just no better way of healing, I think, than actually taking the time to practice.
I agree. And I want to go back to another word that you said, because there's two things that I wrote down that I want to comment on. Number one, you used the word, we've both been using the word beginners. And then the other thing is chronic pain. Let me just talk about the chronic pain for 1 second, then I want to go back to beginners. So you don't know this, Tavi, yet, but I'll tell you now while we're recording, because I'm happy to share this in general. I just recently was diagnosed with arthritis in my shoulder area up here, and it goes kind of into my rib cage. So it's kind of a costochondritis, osteoarthritis situation. So I've had this, I've had this kind of problem with this left side for quite some time. And, after further investigation, that's what it is. So I know you have some medical things going on that cause you some chronic pain, and now I'm kind of dealing with a little bit of this chronic pain too. But what I will never do is I will never say that will stop me from the movement, or even going into certain poses, or making my body move itself, not making it move itself, but getting my body into shapes that will allow fluidity and opening in the body, because that's the healing of the chronic pain. That's how you treat chronic pain. It's not just shoving a bunch of medication. There's nothing wrong with medication. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, again, it's the stopping word thing. We have to be open-minded to what could help us move through the world. And that's number one. Number two, this whole thing about beginners. If, when I think back to, let's go back to that time we met in teacher training in 2019. So this was, pre-pandemic, pre any of this stuff. You and I were in very different places in both of our lives with relationships and self-worth and all of that stuff. We were in very different places. But you know what we were? We were fucking beginners. We didn't know how to sequence. We didn't know how to sequence a yoga class. We didn't know what taking hours and hours of hot power practices and other practices and other physical movements, and we didn't know anything about any of that. So when people say, oh, I don't want to go to yoga, or oh, I don't want to do, and we can start kind of moving it off to even the word yoga, because we're talking about anything in life now. When you're talking about something that you have never done before and you beat yourself up because you don't know what you're doing yourself a disservice, because you are a beginner. It's like this podcast stuff. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, like it took us, this is the third time to finally get like the audio and the recording, because neither of us are experts at this stuff. We're not.
Right.
We are beginners. And we beat ourselves up. You and I were just talking about financial stuff before we got on to record, and how we were like, oh, I didn't realize this could be this, or this could happen, or this, but because that's not, everyone is a beginner. Every person is a beginner. And I guess it took me a long time to realize that, like, I was the person who would go, I can never do that because
same.
But we don't know, because we've never done it. We've never done it before.
Exactly. It's the what's the word? The conditioned belief that failure equals the fear of failure.
Yes, conditioned belief.
Once you take that fear out of failure and change that perspective of the word into first attempt in learning, I even tell my kids, you can't be afraid to fail. Failing is good because you learn. We failed 2 times, and now we learned what we needed. And now we're, it's just a matter of perspective, and it takes courage to be a beginner. It really does, because once it means you have accomplished or overcome that fear of failure. Once you're okay with being a beginner and knowing that failure is likely, it's just your first attempt in learning. How many times did we have to practice sequence posing? And we had to practice, teach so many times, to where it was in our muscle memories. And we wanted to cry and scream at the same time. And so we got it. But then once we had that, it took all of that fear and anxiety out. So it's literally just being a beginner means that you're brave, I think. And
that's good.
Well, because it takes courage.
It does take courage, and and what we're talking about, I want to try to make this as simple for everyone who's listening and watching. Also, even though we're talking at a pretty simple level, I want to go even simpler and say this: the reason we are afraid of things, and this is I love talking to you about fear, Tavi. I love talking about fear with you. But the reason we are fearful is because at its fundamental level, fear doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel good. Grief doesn't feel good. Sadness doesn't feel good. Anxiety doesn't feel good. Depression, none of these things feel good. But this is a hard truth for people to understand. Every day is not always going to feel good. It's just not. Life is full of obstacles. Now, there are ways to bring more happiness into your life and more joy and more fulfillment by taking steps and doing, introducing habits and all those things. But when we're talking about this fear of failing, it's because failing doesn't feel good. And we give up. We think we're not good enough. And we have these limiting beliefs, and we have these conditioned beliefs. I read something where it was about when you're younger and you start to grow up, and when you're younger, you cry whenever you want, and you're a toddler and you just do whatever you want, and then you get a little older and you're still doing kind of whatever you want. And the first time that a peer or an adult looks at you and makes you feel like what you're doing is weird or out of the ordinary, that's when that stuff starts to tick in your brain. And then you start to be afraid of those feelings. So I think it's very important for people to understand that if you are having these stopping words, you need to take a look, because there's something in there that's, I'm sure, from the past that is so uncomfortable that when you start moving through things as an adult, you just want to give up all the time. And I was that person. I still can be that person sometimes.
Same. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then and then I start to recognize it in other people. And when you recognize it in other people, relationships start to change, because if you're moving forward with courage and someone else stays back, your relationship with that other person is going to change, because you understand that 99% of the time everything's going to be fine. But there's always that 1% where your brain magnifies it into this big catastrophe because there has been past traumas or whatever has happened in your life. So fear is a big deal. Fear is a big deal for people, myself included.
Yeah, and same. I was due to a relationship pretty much living only in fear for the longest time. I mean, it was almost a decade of my life, which is what actually caused some of my issues medically. And because of that and not knowing, what to do from that situation, it caused me to have all of these adverse effects. And then, so I felt complacent. I was scared. And once I initially got over that, I had to realize, for one, a body emotion stays in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when we're staying in that motion and not letting the fear or the pain, because it's either like a physical pain or the pain that we think we're going to experience with fear, we can keep moving through that. We can keep moving forward, even though we think it might hurt. If we keep moving forward, it'll be behind us. I'm not saying run away from it. I'm saying get through it. It's like animals. It's the buffalo or the bison that they head through the heart of the storm because they know that it'll be over quicker. Yeah. And I feel like once you are introduced as a beginner to something, kind of like embracing that buffalo spirit and getting through something because it's going to be hard, is what's going to help you. Just like movement. It's not going to be easy at first. It's going to be hard. Nothing in life worth doing is ever just easy. And that's where you get that, confidence comes from that area. Confidence, self-worth, all of that. And then you can tell those limiting beliefs that are those people that look at you funny. We'll just pretend that those people that give you those funny looks for doing what you feel called to do, limiting beliefs, that's their name. And once you feel the courage to keep moving forward, those limiting beliefs and those eyes get so tiny. They get so small. And you don't have to worry about them anymore because you're living in your purpose and you're walking with courage, and you have that and you've conquered fear. It's no longer this big thing to, rule your life.
Yeah. When I think of fear, so I'm actually afraid of heights, which is strange because I love my roller coasters. You could take me way up there and drop me down and I'm fine. But if I had to go up an elevator all the way up so many floors and stand, that will terrify me. But I can't let that stop me because the views are incredible. The views from up there are incredible. Wonderful. So the slim chance that something would happen to me, which is the slimmest of slims, going up a building, is not I can't let that stop me. But that kind of manifests itself into bigger things for people. And when you talked about moving forward and the limiting beliefs, you call the other people limiting beliefs and your vision of it starts to shrink and so on. It makes me think about the other piece to that when you're talking about being a beginner and moving through your world with a purpose and with a direction, because I know you are the same. We have lived in a life, a lot of our lives, moving around with no direction and no purpose. Yeah. And when you do that and you're just going through the motions and getting through the day, then these things are going to keep bubbling up in you if you keep just trying to get through the day. And there are days where you do have to say, I need to just get through the day. There are days like that. But if those days are almost all of your days or the majority of your days, then we have to recognize that there's something going on. And I see this often in past relationships. You talked about a relationship that you had that brought on physical problems. I've had relationships that have brought on physical problems. And in these recent years, I've started to realize that there are relationships where the intention behind what the other folks are doing. Let me back up and say, once I found my purpose and what my purpose is going forward, I would notice if other people's purpose is either non-existent or there's that word I like to use, covert control. And that whole covert control thing is a big deal too, which for those of you that are watching or listening, understanding that covert control for me means, let's say you are in a relationship with another person. It doesn't matter what the relationship is. It doesn't have to be romantic. It could be a friendship, whatever. But it's me trying to control the outcome by either doing things, saying things, or suggesting things that are going to drive your actions in a different way. So an example of that
to fit your narrative.
Correct, to fit my narrative. So if you and I went out to eat, Tavi, and I see this so often in restaurant, you go out to eat with another person. If you and I sat down, and this is at a very, very basic level, and you said, I will have a chicken salad. And you say that to the server, and I go, don't you want to get soup? And you go, no, I want a chicken salad. Oh, I thought you wanted soup. Why don't you get some soup? Go ahead, get soup. Why can't you have some soup? What about dessert? Do you want dessert? Like, people need to stop doing that. Here's why. Number one, it's annoying. But number two, if you're doing that with another person at a restaurant, you're doing that with another person in other areas of their life. Like, why are you hanging around with this person? Or why are you doing this? And you're covertly controlling them. And that is a big deal for me. Big deal.
Yeah.
I don't like that. And I also don't like when people leave you out of things because they think that you can't handle it. That to me isn't love. That is control. That is ownership. You should be the one to make the decisions, not the other people. What do you think about all that?
So covert control, I mean, I know we've had conversations of such. Covert control, in my experience, is basically, someone manipulating your actions and words to fit their narrative.
Yep.
For their own gain or control. And yes, if you're doing it on simple levels of, and I probably have been guilty of this in the past without realizing, because it's all about intention.
Yes.
It's intention. And leaving somebody out intentionally because you don't want to deal with their choices of not partaking into a certain activity, you want to just intentionally leave them out because you don't want to deal with them. That's control, because you're controlling your environment and not giving them an option. There's a loving way to do it and there's a controlling way to do it. And when you do it lovingly, you let them know, hey, by the way, this is when you care about someone, you shouldn't be controlling them, period. I mean, there's levels of, have-tos with kids and parents and, things of that nature with responsibilities. But it's different when you're adult friends and you're controlling your own environment by segue of exclusion, controlling what they can and can't do because you're actively excluding someone because you're, making that choice to control that situation.
Yeah.
So I totally understand that. And my experience, which we've talked about, was emotional manipulation through victimhood, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The victim mentality, feeling called out because they were given a boundary and told to respect this boundary, and then they attack that way. They just could not take accountability and wanted to control the narrative to gain their intention was to gain, you know, whatever energy it was from that situation. They wanted to gain attention and energy that should have not been put out there in the way because it wasn't theirs to begin with. And when they were called out on it and told no, basically attacked because they can't take accountability for their own victimhood and use that. It's like, okay, I was abused once. You can't say things like that because I was abused. You have to walk on eggshells now because I was once abused. You know, don't act that way. Don't leave things here because I was abused. You can't oppress me in these ways because I was abused. And that's the victim mentality I'm talking about, is like, you can't make everybody cater to you just because something traumatic happened to you.
You're responsible for that. You're responsible.
Exactly.
But that goes back again to this whole like fear stuff. Like, what are you afraid of that you need to control all this? Relationships are about coming together, and they're enhancing each other. They're not controlling each other. And we get into the mistake, and I've been there and you've been there. And if you're listening or watching, you probably have been there too. You've been in a relationship where you have wanted the other person to be something that they are not. Or you have these expectations of another person that you want to get them to. See, when you enter a relationship, you're not entering a relationship so that you can be the Dr. Phil for them. You are not the therapist. You are a partner. Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't have emotional support. That's not what I'm saying. But the control mechanism, and what you were describing just a minute ago when you're talking about this victim mentality, that to me also borders on the narcissism stuff. When it
absolutely does.
Yeah, when you are dealing with someone who has a narcissistic personality, you are dealing with someone who has zero sense of empathy for another human. They have really no self-worth. They don't like something about themselves, and so they just project that out to everybody else, and it shames, it degrades, it gaslights, it pushes people into situations where the other person feels like they have to change who they are so that the narcissist is happy. You should never change who you are for another person, ever.
No, I've been there, done that.
Me too. And then I've had nights where I haven't slept. I've had nights where I've been looking at the phone nonstop to see if they would respond. I've been through all of that shit. And now the boundaries would go up if that kind of stuff started happening again.
Well, the conversation regarding narcissism continues with Tavi and I on the next episode of this podcast, as well as topics like working with other people and some struggles there, maybe some sexuality talk, and a lot of talk about insecurity. And we get a little vulnerable with you. So stay tuned. The next new episode airs in 1 week. We'll see you all then.